Welcome to the Getting High on Leadership series featuring Paul Karasik. Paul is one of America's top management consultants helping leaders succeed. He is the author of 9 books, including Sweet Persuasion and Brilliant Thoughts and Provocative Questions. His insights appear regularly in major publications, and he is one of the most sought-after executive coaches. Paul founded the American Seminar Leaders Association and the Psychedelic Institute of Los Angeles. He is a popular speaker at national conferences and has been on stages across all 50 states and internationally. Paul's work addresses the question, how can we transform conflict in business into collaboration? With decades of experience in management, leadership, and psychedelics, he brings a unique perspective on personal and societal growth. In this series, we'll be discussing his latest book, Getting High on Leadership, The Leader's Guide to Higher Consciousness. We'll be exploring the concepts, techniques, and mindset required to revolutionize leadership. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Getting High on Leadership series. My name is Rob, your host, and sitting next to me is Mr. Paul Karasik, the author of Getting High on Leadership. We are making our way through the book, and today we're talking about the section called To Know Thyself. If you're following along in the ebook, go to page 40. Paul, welcome, man. Once again, we're continuing this journey throughout the book, and we've got a good chapter here today, To Know Thyself. A deepity, if there ever was one, something easier to say than actually enact.
Yeah, and this is a really important chapter, Rob. This chapter is really, it could have been the first chapter in the book, honestly, in the sense of where the secrets are, and even to the point of who's watching right now, who's watching this video. The idea that there's something outside of us that's going to provide us with solutions to our problems. Now, there's 2 types of people that we're looking to provide solutions to our problems. One person is providing those on a technical level. For example, yesterday I went to the dentist. He has expertise and he has knowledge, but it's of a technical nature. So that's one type of knowing thyself. What am I good at? What's my strengths? What's my weaknesses? Right? That's one level. I think we had it. I don't know if we were on camera the other day or we were just talking, but I think we're on camera, and we said one of the great leaders in business said, my secret to success is hiring people that are smarter than I am. And in that sense, those are technical people. Yes, we want to listen to whatever when the dentist showed me the tooth and the X-ray and what the treatment was going to be and so on and so forth. I needed that externally. But what we're talking about in this chapter is psychological. To know ourselves psychologically.
Right. To know it's beyond that material or physical kind of skill-based.
Anything skill-based, exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about to know thyself, and those skills and what am I good at and all that kind of stuff, that falls into technical. But what we're talking about this chapter is to know thyself, to know your thinking. When we say myself, what is myself? What is myself? To know myself. And then
actually we get trying to see the observer again.
See, it's not to see the observer, but to see through the observer. To see from the observer point of view. So to know thyself, so let's pull it back on this a little bit. To know thyself, there's 2 selves to know. One self is that invention, identity that we're given when we were born of our name, a place, a background, and the ego is identifying with that self. I'm Paul Karasik. You're Rob Sanchez. That's who I am. Right? That's who I am. And Rob has this background in cannabis and psychedelics and so on and so forth, and all that's a made up. It's a made up identity. It's all, because if I said, where is that? Where is Rob? There is no place where Rob is. There is no place where Paul is. It's
Right, where that idea
it's an idea.
exists.
It's an idea. It's a thought. So really, if
Yeah.
we really look at it, then that self is a made up self. It's a thought self. It's created by thought about
Hmm.
what you are. And then and of course, the other self is the self that's pure consciousness and that can observe the smaller self. When I say observe, what do I mean? I mean observing, for example, how we get into fear patterns or anxiety patterns. To observe it, to observe it. If I get up this morning, I can work myself up into a whole bunch of what if this happens, or, are we canceling that, or did this come through? Whatever it is, I start to see that a lot of my anxiety, a lot of my discomfort, a lot of my uncomfortability comes from thoughts, right? Would we agree to
Right.
that? Yeah,
Definitely.
it comes from thoughts. So I have to take an interest in those thoughts. I have to observe those thoughts. I have to begin to see from the higher self, from pure consciousness, how lower self is responding to things. Uh, you get some news, and you ruminate on it, and it becomes a whole crisis in your mind. What if this? What if that? And so we begin to see that fear, anxiety, all these things of this reside in that self, that created self, that identity self. So when we say know thyself, we really have to ask the question, which self are we talking about?
Hmm.
In this chapter, we're saying know both selves. Know the technical self. Where do I need help? Where do I need assistance? Engage that way, and then look at the psychological self, the higher, from the point of view of the higher self at that. And we begin to see a pattern. We begin to observe, and we begin to know our mind. I mean, think about it. Most of our discomfort comes from our thoughts, but very few people take an interest in those thoughts enough to understand where they're coming from. How do I eliminate them? I mean, that's what I want to know. And how do I get out of this thinking? Because it's what creates hell every day for me. And certainly as a leader, I'm in no shape to lead when I'm full of fear, anxiety, depression, anxiousness. That if a leader gets on camera in that kind of a state, what does it do to the people that are following? They get anxious. They get
Right.
they feel, like
It's that cascade again
it's
that they
that
can
cascading.
begin. They don't want to be that first domino in a negative sense.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So this chapter is beckoning people to the source of all solutions, all psychology. How do I create peace of mind today to be a great leader? In the midst sometimes of chaos, and in the midst of change, in the midst of problems that come up. And this is through the higher self, observing the lower self. And it's an amazing process, Rob, that the simple observation without any kind of impression of what is the best outcome, but just the observation of it. And again,
Hmm.
we this is a theme that comes up many times in this particular series, is the ego is the big problem. The ego getting into when we talked about servant leadership in past chapters. That's the diminishing the presence, the power, the coming from space of just the ego. We're introducing a new presence. That presence is observing the ego, and now we're getting to really watch the ego, not just respond from the ego when somebody offends you or hurts your feelings or disappoints you or uh, has a negative effect on something that you want to do. We're going we're now allowing for new opportunities to come into that mix by not identifying and knowing when we say know thyself, knowing that self that is pure consciousness. And anybody can do this. This is not a technique. This is not, you don't have to go to yoga. You don't have to learn a technique. It's by simple observation of the way we respond. And through the observation, without any intention on it, we find a change. So let me give you an example. If I touched a hot stove and I saw the stove was just finished cooking something, I'm not going to touch the hot stove again. If I touched it once and I got burned, I automatically don't want to touch it. It's not like I'm resisting touching. It's not, there's nothing behind it. It's just an understanding that when the stove is hot and I touch it, I'm going to get burned. So I didn't need any technique. It was through the observation.
Through that observation and experience.
And experience that now, that's right. So when I get up in the morning and I'm a leader, and I know that I want to have my presence for my people, I want to communicate on the levels that we've been speaking of, that if I'm all riddled with all kinds of thoughts, all kinds of negativity, I can't function. I'm not bringing that presence into leadership. And so it's not through any kind of forced act that we're talking about here. It's just by simple observation of the way the mind works. And where does the anxiety come from? And let's really put it out on the table right now. Where it comes from is thoughts about the future and thoughts about the past. Well, just ask yourself the question, when does fear and anxiety help a situation?
Right. Mostly when you need to run from something right now. It is an urgent thing.
Well, yeah. And the funny thing about that example, and I've been given that many times, is in that example, there is no thinking. When a car is coming at you and you're crossing the street, you don't think. There's no thinking. You see the car and you respond. So, yeah, it's not it's a non-issue example, right? Because there is no thinking. You don't have to think about it. That comes naturally. And there's a certain amount of thinking. I would agree with you that has to do with self-preservation. Think this thing through. What are you eating? What are you drinking? Is it you have to think through things, right? I mean, to a certain level. But the most of the thinking is about things that never will happen.
Just
and the biggest thing in this chapter here, Rob, is to understand that thinking does worrying produce any great results?
It's pretty far from action, isn't it, to worry? Yeah.
It's pretty far from action, and it really it freezes you when you're in fear. There's no space for new ideas. You're just wrapped up in that, oh my God, thinking. And as a leader, this is the worst position to be in. Because you're emanating that fear, and that creates disruption. So how do we feel secure? Again, we can only be as good as our own consciousness in leadership. And if our consciousness is wrapped up in all this, our patterns. And so when we see the words know thyself, we're talking about observing that behavior that produces no positive results, and observing and start to see it. And after a while, it diminishes. The anxiety, because you see it like a hot stove. You see like, wow, if I start on that strain of thought, then I know where it's going to take me.
Yeah, so it's really kind of knowing
oh, I shouldn't have, regrets about behavior in the past. What I should have said this, I should have said that. It doesn't produce any
Right.
positive
And it's maybe good
effect.
to acknowledge those
Is that
things if you're thinking that, but not to linger, right? It's they're not meant to be like the emotion you dwell on for the next, you know, hours or days. Yeah.
dominant? Yeah. And we all have friends like that, or mothers like that, or sisters like that, friends like that are just constantly worried. You know, I got it. We had these fires here in LA
Yes.
recently, and there's some people that just I hardly even knew them, but they're so worried. Are you okay? You know, because they worry. That's what they
Yeah.
do all day.
So
So they're
seeing the
worried about
headlines,
me,
instantly they're thinking,
and
who, oh no, who do I know there? And Paul shows up on the
who do
list.
I know? They
Yeah.
boom, yeah. Oh, he's my friend in
Yeah.
LA. And really, I'm not even that close. But they're so
Right.
immersed in worry that it's just a way of life, and you begin to see how much part of your day, if you really take this chapter to heart, is dominated by these thoughts that you're just better off not thinking. And it'd be great to
Yeah.
suppress thoughts, but that's how you get it. That's how we create drug addicts. Is by it works to a degree. You know, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about
Right.
wisdom. I'm talking about observation, and I'm talking about not suppressing anything. When that anxiety comes up, when that anxiousness comes up, to just simply observe it and say, "Oh, I see. That's my mind. That's the way the mind does. It grabs onto, it projects in the future. It reflects on the past, and the results are always the same. And after a while, you just go like, "Hey, why do I? Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Let's just, whatever it is we're doing, let's just do it and not
Right.
think about it."
Then when you're in
And
those situations with where you need to lead or you see those triggers coming and you know your own kind of inner mindscape, your own terrain and avenues, you can navigate then better through that to be better in those situations.
absolutely, oh, if you take this chapter to heart, you get real, very tactical. You do all the right things. You say all the right things. So yeah, this is a big chapter, and we're going to touch on it a little bit in the next
Sure.
chapter as
Yeah.
well.
Thank you, folks, for listening. And please, below, you can find the book link. You can go all the way to the beginning and start this journey with us, or just meet us on the next episode. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Getting High on Leadership series. If you have any questions, you can comment below or send them in via email to paul@paulkarasik.com. Follow him on Instagram at PK_The Conversation. Find out more at wholesalerinstitute.com and psychedelic-awakening.com. The Getting High on Leadership series is produced by Rob Sanchez and Apartment 113, which can be found at apartment113.com and followed on Instagram at APT_113.